right now on Higher Journeys Radio with Alexis Brooks. The UFO phenomenon has multiple dimensions. Many, if not most, we cannot even begin to fully comprehend. Grant Cameron, a seasoned UFO investigator and frequent guest on Higher Journeys, has found yet another angle to this ever-growing anomaly that he has linked directly to a thesis he's been developing for some time. Apports, the appearance or movement of objects seemingly out of nowhere and by no known source, connected to extreme instances of synchronicity, Grant feels are directly linked to the ET contact syndrome. I asked Grant to share with us some of his more recent findings in this regard and how, if at all, this reshapes his ideas of some of what seen UFOs are really all about. Grant, thanks so much for joining me last minute for this, what I'm going to call impromptu 30-minute or so conversation. But man, you got so much going on. I've been watching your Twitter feed and I've been checking out your Facebook page, and I know that you are doing some amazing work on the experiential or experiencer side of this broad field we call the ET and UFO phenomenon, as well as you have a foot in the other world too, don't you, on what I refer to as the more mechanistic. Lots going on there. We're going to leave that part of the conversation for another time. Today, I want to talk about two areas that you've been diving into on the experiential side. First, having to do with what are called apports. Mm-hmm. And then I'd like to have you give us a bit of an update on some interesting things that have been taking place at Mount Shasta. So those are the two areas that we're going to tackle. But before we go there, let me just welcome you once again, one of our regular guests who I love, to Higher Journeys. Welcome back, Grant.
Well, thanks, Alexis. I appreciate your having me on, and I appreciate your bringing up apports, which could be the most important subject there is to talk about.
Why? Why is it the most important in this?
The more I look at it, and like everything else in my career, I got dragged into this. I didn't decide to do this. It was just a bunch of synchronicities happened, and it was like one thing after another thing after another thing, and it was basically saying you got to look at this. And so basically, it starts with Ray Hernandez, a conversation at LAX airport, and he's talking about this guy that he has. It's his top experiencer that he has, and he starts talking about this guy, and he's got this entire collection of I guess you'd call them manifestations and apports. So manifestation is something that pops in from someplace. We've never really seen it before. We don't know where it comes from. And things that are apported are things in your house that are moved around, or you find coins and stuff like this. So it's movement of things. So he talked about it, and I sort of thought, well, this is very weird. And it basically went into, as you know, the To the Stars is very, well, I guess everybody in the UFO community is infatuated with this metal stuff. So they're saying, you know, we got these pieces of metal, and, you know, if we can analyze these things, and they're very strange, and they're layered, and we can't layer the stuff, and it's done atom by atom and stuff like this. And everybody's just gaga over this metal stuff. And when he was telling me this story, I'm thinking, I wonder if that's what the metals are. Because you see, what everybody's believing, and we have very smart people, and yet they're making very illogical sort of conclusions. They're saying, you know, this flying saucer comes across the galaxy, it makes it all the way across the galaxy, and then it gets into our atmosphere, and little pieces start to fall off it. And I say, no, there's no pieces falling off flying saucers. They're dropping this stuff. This is like apportation stuff. And I actually contacted Hal Puthoff, who runs the Institute for Advanced Studies, who was the guy with Kit Green from the CIA, who were running the remote viewing program in the 1970s, early 1970s. And I knew that he had this stuff going on in his lab. It suddenly occurred to me that I said, he must know. He's the guy that's doing the analysis on this material. And what happened was, if you remember back into the early days when Uri Geller came to America, they had Uri Geller at SRI in San Francisco. And basically, they went out for lunch. Hal Puthoff and Edgar Mitchell tell the story. They go there, and Uri Geller's eating ice cream, and suddenly he bites down and he cuts his lip, and he pulls out this pin, and he gives it to Edgar Mitchell, and Edgar Mitchell said, "That's a pin of mine I think it was an Air Force pin, that he had lost in Houston a number of years before. And he said, how did this get in your ice cream? And so he takes the pin, they go back to SRI, and I think it's later the same day, they're in the lab, Uri Geller's in another room, and the back half of that pin suddenly goes dink in behind them, and it falls in behind them. And then they have a second pin that falls in that same period of time when Uri Geller's around. So that's when I said to Hal Puthoff, I said, Hal, you had this stuff happening around you in the 1970s. So is this metal pieces of flying saucers, or is this something they're dropping to get our attention to whatever they're doing, some sort of message? And then all he said to me is he didn't deny it. He said, we'll analyze the material one step at a time. We're going to analyze the material first, one step at a time. So he knows this connection, and that's what I'm saying, that if you go back into UFO history, you can see that the very first major sighting was a manifestation or an apportation case, and that was Maury Island. If you remember, this is 3 days before Kenneth Arnold had his sighting. They're on Maury Island, and these two guys are there, and they're in a boat, and this UFO comes flying by, and there's three of them, and the one gets in trouble, and it sort of like explodes and rains down all this material all over the beach. There's a dog that's killed by this material falling. Somebody breaks their arm, it hits somebody in the arm or whatever, and they gather some of this material. The U.S. Air Force goes in there, grabs this material, flies out, crashes the plane, which starts the first conspiracy story. So right from the word go, you see this stuff, and you see these. It happened in Brazil as well. There's this famous stuff with magnesium where there's UFOs flying along the shore, and all of a sudden it's in trouble, and it explodes into 1,000 pieces and rains down over these people. And I'm going like, are they really crashing, or is this all intentional? Is this all like and what you start to see when you start looking at these apportation things is they happen around experiences a lot. For example, when we were talking earlier about this Tony Bintz. He comes to America, he wants to see me, and he starts telling this bizarre story about how his wife doesn't want him to come. He's never left the country. He's got very, very serious diseases, and so he says, I need a sign. And these feathers start to fall, one after another, one day after another day, and they fall right in front of him. And so then he goes to his wife and he says, I've got a sign. They want me to go to America. I'm supposed to meet with Grant. And his wife says, there's feathers everywhere. And then he said, so he goes out into the backyard and he says, okay, guys, if you really want me to go, you got to help me out here. And he says this big giant feather about 2 feet long comes from the left over his head, sits above his head, and he goes, thank you, thank you. And this thing, he said, goes like a rocket, just takes off into the sky. Then he goes and tells his wife, and she says, Tony, there's feathers everywhere. And so she's still not bought into this thing. And yet she knows he's taken a bunch of really weird photographs. That's why he originally wanted to see me. He had I guess maybe 50 photographs. And some of the photographs he's got are like none you've ever seen before. Just almost like they're setting themselves up. Helicopters with UFOs in the photograph. Helicopters 50 feet over his head. Just very bizarre stuff. So his wife knew that there was some bizarre stuff going on. So that's when she says, she figures, well, I'll give it a try. So she's going to work. She works in London. They're about 60 minutes out of London. And so she's going on the train. So she says, okay, if this is for real, I want to see a feather. And this feather falls in front of her. And now she's sort of having her experience. She gets on the train and she's sort of bewildered what's going on. She says, okay, there's never any feathers on the London Bridge. So she said, okay, I want to see a feather on the London Bridge. So she's gone on the London Bridge. She's just coming off the London Bridge, and suddenly down comes this feather right in front of her.
Right after she asks for it? Not even.
Yeah, she asked for the second one too. So then she finishes work, and then she says, okay, I want to see not one feather. I want to see lots of feathers. She gets on the train. She goes back to where they live, south of London. She gets off the train. As the door opens, there's a bush there with hundreds of feathers in the bush. Now she's just flipping out. She just has no idea what the heck's going on. She goes home. She says to Tony, you can go to America.
I guess she should.
What changed? She said, when the kids go to bed tonight, I'll tell you. So she tells him the story. The next day, I think she's working from home. She works 2 days from home. She is sitting at her desk, which is about 5 feet from this patio door that goes into the garden where he has a lot of these sightings. So the patio door is open about 12 inches. So she says, okay, I want to see another feather. So she's sitting there, and all of a sudden this feather falls down between the patio doors, comes in the patio door, and lands at her feet. So that's how this whole thing starts. What happened was he wanted to show me his UFO photographs, and I said, well, I'm really not interested in UFO photographs. But I interviewed him. I said, Tony, you ever have anything weird? You ever have anything sort of move around in the house? And he said, what? And he told me the story about the keys flying through the room that his wife had seen, and bizarre things with the kids that had happened, and doors slamming and stuff like that. And I said, yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then he told me the feather story. So when he gets to Laughlin, and I won't get into the details, but there are another half a dozen, maybe even more than half a dozen feather stories that happen at Laughlin.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one was, we go to Tucson, Desta and I, after all these other feather things that happen at Laughlin, like Paula Harris coming down with a big giant feather shirt on.
Oh, no, you're kidding me. Are you kidding?
Tucson, and that's when I have my own experience, and that's when you get sold. Like, you're not sold when you hear other people, but when it happens to you, that's
absolutely for confirmation.
And I find these feather cards at a church. There's this old church there. Desta wants to go into the gift store, and I see these feathers. So I go, wow, this is pretty weird. These white feather cards, giant greeting cards. So I'm photographing the first one, and then I'm photographing the second one, and I put the card down, and and there's Desta standing there with a feather. And I said, get out of here. She said, yeah, I'm standing outside waiting for you, and this feather falls at my feet. So where I tied into the UFO thing is I say, do they really need to give us feathers, or is this what this is all about? Because the more I look at the UFO phenomena, the more I think it is not physical. It is not. There's something weird going on here.
Absolutely.
This goes later to Shasta, but what I start to think is, are the UFOs themselves actually apports? And you even get to the thing with the crashes. If they can make, and there's various stories. It happens in various different types of phenomena, like with Ouija boards. There's a famous story told where the one girl, happens in 1989 in Great Britain, where the girl puts some crystal and something else on the Ouija board to make it work even better. They're dealing with this girl who claims to be a 12-year-old girl from Great Britain from about 1910. She's on the other side of the board, and they're talking to her. And so then the board makes this message. What's this for? And the girl said, well, I put this crystal and some other item on the board to maybe make the board work better. And then they said, would you like me to, and the board says, would you like me to combine them for you? And the girl says, yeah, that'd be nice. And then they said, would you like some gold and silver in it? And the girl goes, yeah, that'd be nice. And they do this lapis lazuli stone.
Absolutely, I'm familiar with it, yeah.
You're familiar with the story? Where it falls under the table and has the gold and silver streaks in it?
Well, I'm familiar with the stone, lapis, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and it just has this gold and silver streak in it. And this appears underneath, these apports would fall, or these would be like manifestations, but they fall under, the board would go, the glass, you're using a shot glass, and you could hear it going around the board. That means an apport is about to appear. And this thing would appear under the table, and they had photographs appear. They had a photograph that appeared it looked like from about 1910, and they said top right. And this is the girl, this Addie girl. It's a very, very bizarre story. So you see these apport things. So then you start wondering, is a UFO actually a UFO, or is it something that's come across the veil? Because with these manifestations, we know from a lot of the work that's been done, is they can make something appear, and it may be a small thing like a polished stone or something like that, but they can make it disappear again. So the thing is that what's happening? Is everything on the other side of the veil, so to speak, or in higher vibrant consciousness, and they can come like a being. And I always say this with beings, that a lot of people will describe a being that comes and then turns into a ball of light and disappears, or it's a ball of light which turns into an alien. And I always say, is it a ball of light or is it an alien? And if it's a ball of light, does it eat bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee? So we get confused with this physical thing, that it's coming in, it can become physical, but it can go back into that, whatever that world is, non-physical. Right. And we sort of assume that it's just a physical thing. So that's where I'm starting to think with the apports, and that's what they're doing with the metal. They're dropping this metal. And in fact, if you've read the book by Diane Pasulka, she talks about this guy by the name of Tyler. She calls him Tyler D. His name is actually Tim. I know, I've met this guy. And they call it the gifting field. They found this field where they believe there was a crash, and they call it the gifting field. And that's the whole idea is, the more I look at the UFO phenomenon, the more I think that it's way less physical than you think it is. It's a lot more
Absolutely.
spiritual than you
Yeah.
think it is.
Well,
And
hold
yeah,
on a second now. Grant, there's
yeah,
so much in there because I'm taking some notes here because there's so many elements. You're really onto something really big, and I tend to agree with you. I mean, look, what you're talking about from the story of Tony and his wife to the manifestation of these what we call apports or objects.
yeah,
Make me think of several things that you are very well familiar with. And that has to do, well, first of all, fundamentally, it has to do with consciousness because we're not just talking about a one-way communication here. We're talking about obviously something that is conscious on the other end, whatever that is, as well as our own consciousness being intertwined with one another, feathers showing up upon request, not arbitrarily, but upon request. So
yeah,
there's some link that's going on between us, and I've always said this, and who or whatever we're communicating with. The other thing that comes into this that is clear and unequivocal, Grant, is this idea of the contact modalities all being connected. We're talking about telekinesis. We're talking about just manifestation. We're talking about ESP broadly. So the contact modalities and how they're all linked are coming in here. And then lastly, before you continue, I want to bring up in terms of the apports and manifestations coming out of seemingly nowhere, which they're not. Michael Talbot comes to mind. And I know you know the late Michael Talbot. I know you're familiar with his work, and I'm sure that you're familiar with the fact, as quiet as it was kept until his passing, that he too was a contactee, an abductee, an experiencer who worked with Bud Hopkins in regression. Michael Talbot is famous for telling stories about multiple occasions of being in his bedroom and having what he called dry spaghetti noodles just fall out of the air and onto his chest, and other objects that would materialize. Keep in mind, we're talking about apports and we're talking about an experiencer, yet another link. So I wanted to just draw those things out for you because, again, I think you're onto something here. And we're talking about something that's not extraterrestrial as we think, but perhaps, well, certainly multidimensional and extra-dimensional.
yeah. It's got to do with reality. Like, how does reality actually work? It's like the whole idea of the idea that there may not even be a physical world, that
Right.
whatever you see out there is going through your consciousness. It's happening inside consciousness. It's not you're looking out into the world. And that's a hard thing to grasp because it looks like it's so physical. And so that's where I think it may come down to understanding what reality is all about. And so
Absolutely.
when you get experiences like Michael Talbot, who's talking about that, and the gravel on the roof, and the
Gravel on the
sort of
roof, right.
the emerald that appears on the Buddha's head, that his wife, or he's showing his mother. Was that there before? And all this kind of stuff. A lot of people will confuse it. They parse it, as you point out, and they don't realize it's all the same thing. So that's when you can ask experiences, and you'll find this very unique, is you'll say to them, like I said to Tony, you ever have anything fly around the room and everything ever fall out of the sky? And they go, oh yeah. But then they'll say, but that's not UFO. They all think it's something different. And we're starting to realize when you talk to experiencers, most experiencers have this kind of stuff. And you get like, if you're familiar with the Paranormal Rangers, they
Yes.
do investigations, and they did a lecture, which I think is over 1 million hits on the internet. They do a lecture where they talk about being in this sort of a poltergeist environment it's a building that they were told to call in there, and they were there for the weekend. They had 64 coins appear, all heads up, and I have more than 6 people who have dimes, and they start telling me these stories about dimes, and I'll say, how many dimes have you got? And they'll say, oh, 40. And they think it's their dead mother giving them 2 of them or stuff like that. And people finding dimes in the middle of the bathtub, like not places you would expect, or coins in the middle of the floor, always heads up and stuff like that. And you start to realize that there's this connection, almost like a signaling type thing. And it goes even to when I was at Mount Shasta 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, tell us about that.
At first it appeared nothing was happening, because that's usually the pattern. Nothing really happens to me, but the people who are around me, a lot of stuff happens. It's almost like I'm the scribe. I'm the person who's supposed to. And so what happened was, the Friday we were there and I didn't realize anything had happened. Saturday morning, they do these exercises and I'm all upset because they're doing these sort of heavy duty exercises, which I'm not used to, and I'm thinking, man, did I make a mistake coming to this place? and then they started telling the stories, and then they started telling these stories, and it was one of the most active events, and I got to record it. Nobody wanted to record it, so I'll record this. So I did interviews with all these people, maybe 12 hours of interviews, and anybody who had any sort of experience. And what I found with the experiences was this sort of idea how hard it is to make something appear. You think, it's an alien, he just comes through the portal, and then suddenly you have this physical alien. And what I saw with these people, and there was possibly 2 Zendra type events, there was at least 3 actual contacts with non-human intelligence. And these people, what they do there, if you're familiar with how they do it, is they're using vibration. The Rama protocol is you use vibration. You raise the vibration, and then you're able to sort of, their ideas, you lift your vibration, they come down, you meet in the middle in a Zendra, which is like an interdimensional bubble or in some sort of thing. But when I was talking to these people about their experiences, there was no real solid physical alien. They would see it in their mind's eye. Mm-hmm. They would have a vision. It was sort of out there, but it wasn't one-on-one physical. And the one guy described it very clearly, where he said they knew there was 3 of them in this spot. They were in the dark, and they said, there's something here, and they all sense this, like they're sensitive, and they're picking this up. And then the one sees it, and it's appearing like 2 silhouettes that start to appear, and then they sort of collapse and they go back down into this rolling smoke that is going in front of them. And then it tries to reappear into these two beings, and then it collapses back down again. And it's that idea is that it's not that easy to come across the veil, that sometimes you're getting it, you're not getting it. And these people are going through an awful lot of work. And then the other thing that really impressed me, I always thought, because if you're familiar with the Rama thing, they do a ceremony where they do this, what's called the cesium crystal initiation, where they give you these crystals, and the aliens are supposed to put these crystals in your hands. Then you put your hands over your heart, and it's this initiation that makes you very intuitive and sensitive and stuff like that. And so we were supposed to do that. I'd never done it. And I'd heard all these stories about people's stories about what happens in these initiations. So I'm excited. And so what happens is that they get a message. So what they're doing is they're following the intuitive person. They're saying, has anybody got a message? Anybody? And the one guy's name was Mario. And this guy's getting this message. There's a triangle. There's a tree that's fallen over against another tree. It's up on the mountain. So they break up the group at 10:30. They're following this guy. He's like the antenna. He's getting the message. They've got to follow him. And Mario, where are we going to go? Mario leads them up the hill, and they go up, and he's running in the dark and they're trying to keep up to him and stuff. Meanwhile, we're back at the circle, and we're waiting for this crystal ceremony to set up. So it's very high. They know exactly what's going to happen. There's this area outside the circle that's got very high energy in there, and so Enrique Villanueva, who's the sort of the contactee, goes up the mountain with Mario and 8 other people, and the group breaks up. So what happens is, and it's the whole idea of whether it's politics or whether it's whatever, when you start to break up and people are all going in separate directions and everybody has different ideas, then you get everything fragmented. Everything starts to fall apart. It's exactly what happened here. They broke the group up. 10 of them leave the group, and they're going up to the mountain. So all the mantras stop, all the oming stops, all the meditation stops. The group is sitting there. We're all sitting there waiting for the ceremony. People are moving around. People are going to their tents. People are getting in cars. And the energy of that circle died right out. And the girls come back that were going to run it, and they said, the energy's gone.
How could they tell the energy was gone?
Well, they're sensitive, so they're picking it up. They were in the circle, and they knew exactly where the circle was. They've been brought to the circle. Can you feel the energy? Yeah, this is where we're going to do it. And it's a certain spot that they can all sense. But then they said, it's going down. So they said, okay, we got to do some mantras. We got to try to raise it up. We could not raise it up again, because what you'd done is you'd fractured the whole thing. You'd gone from unity, from oneness into separation. And all the energy just died out in that circle. And they did not do the crystal ceremony because the energy in that field had died out. And it happens every time they do this crystal ceremony. And that's what was more important to me. It was that fact, it's not the aliens that are coming in and making the circle. It's you are raising the vibration of that energy thing. And that once it all breaks up and everybody goes in their separate ways and people stop thinking and people stop doing the mantra, the energy dies out.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. How would this all, the incident at Mount Shasta, how would that connect to any likelihood of a presence of craft? Were there any?
Well, there was objects being seen, and again, that
Okay.
comes across like what is an actual object? Because I go back to I do a lecture called the theory of wow, and I say, when a UFO comes and it's got its lights on, like when it goes into a nuclear missile area and sits and hovers above the nuclear missiles, why would it turn its lights on? We don't have lights on our crafts, on our planes. Why does it have lights on it? It has lights on it because it wants you to see it. It's this messaging thing, and it's like they're coming across the veil. So I even go as far now as to think that possibly if they can make like a lapis stone appear with gold and silver streaks in it, can they make a craft? So the idea, you always heard this idea that Roswell and these crashes were purposeful, that they actually crashed on purpose, and that we cannot control any of this. We have, and I'm firmly convinced of this, we have no control. We have bodies, we have crafts, but we cannot turn it on. We have no idea of what to do with this kind of material. And you hear these high-level people talking about this, that you hear that we're going to the stars. No, I believe we have nothing. This thing is so far, it's almost like your cell phone, where my cell phone, you need my fingerprint to make it turn on. You need consciousness to turn on the craft.
Well, sure, of course, but yeah.
And so we got this idea that it's a physical thing, and all you do is pull the engine out of it. And then when I talk to these 50 people that I've got that have flown the craft, they'll all say, no, you become one with the craft. There is no engine. There's no steering wheel. You're one with the craft. You're flying the craft. And it's this mental thing. And it moves it away from this physical world. That's why the more I look at it, the more I say, this thing is not going to be physical. It's like even
I agree.
Physical world, that if you have a near-death experience or a lucid dream or something, those people come back and they say, that's the real world. We're living in the dream. That was more real than the real world.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I say the Apport thing, it's almost like they're giving us signals, especially with this metal stuff, because there's a lot of it. There's 40 different, and it's all little pieces. So why are these little pieces falling, or are they dropping it? Are they purposely dropping it to make you go, wow, what is this? And it makes you think, the same as the lights. What is that thing flying around in the sky? Or even the symbols, like you know that I know that people have triangles. Now, they don't have to leave triangles on people's bodies. They leave triangles there for symbols.
I know that. I know that, right?
This is not your dream. This is for real. And and the more I look at it, the more I think it's all signaling. It's almost, and it's spiritual beings. It's guides. It's aliens. Whatever you want to call it. It's almost like it changes based upon our belief system, almost like John Mack, where he says in that one lecture, he says, Bud, he says, it's kind of weird. I'm the psychiatrist here. You'd think I'd be the one that would get in all the crazy people. And he said, I'm getting all the spiritual ones and you're getting all the bad ones. And he said, maybe that has more to do with you and I than it does with the aliens.
I agree.
And it's this idea that we are part of what is happening around us. We are manifesting.
Right. And that's why I have said that there has to be some sort of a symbiosis that's going on between us and them. Now, I know what you're saying, Grant, in that we can't do anything about it. It's all them. But, I don't know. If there is, it seems to me that whatever they're doing, they're taking something from us in order to complete, whether it's an apport or a contact experience. I always say, I know I sound like a broken record, I think we have some skin in the game. We are maybe giving them some of the fuel for them to make that communication with us. So I tend to think that it could be a little bit more back and forth. I don't know. But that being said, perhaps what you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that clearly their understanding of how to, the malleability of reality and how to leverage that to be able to do these things, they are far more advanced than we are. And yet, I feel they need us as well to complete the mission. What do you think about that?
Yeah, but it still goes back to the oneness thing, that we are them and they are us. And that there is only one mind, and it's all like a game. It's almost like if you hear these people at just listen to one about a near-death experience thing where the girl's talking about the beings and the guides, and they're playing around. She's dead and they're playing around with her body. Like, what should we do? Should we actually it was an Iraq bombing, should we actually make the brain injury worse? And she was laughing, and it was like this idea where it's like if you realize that it's all one thing and that it's multiple lives and that you came into this world to do something, then you're definitely part of the plan, as to, because that's what people want to do. They want to sort of slough it off to not take responsibility for what's going on. So it's convenient to think we're a cork floating down the river, and that we're being buffeted around by evil aliens and good aliens and all these outside forces, when in fact, if reincarnation is a fact, and you got to start looking at the world and saying, why would I choose to do this? That you have a lot of control over what you're doing. And even I have a friend here in Winnipeg who had the sightings where he has these 2 very dramatic sightings, and that's all he has. And he just sort of turns his whole life around. And he goes to a psychic and he says to the psychic, okay, where was those crafts from? And they go, what do you mean, where are they from? You sent them. Yeah, it was you. There's nobody there. You sent it to wake yourself up. And so that's when you start looking at the world that way, that if you take personal responsibility and even if you're wrong, believe that you are in charge of manifesting whatever's happening to you, you got to say, if in a reincarnation world, it's not good and bad, it's experience. And from every experience, you're supposed to learn something. And if you treat the world that way, then you make all the right decisions because you take responsibility for whatever's happening to you at this point. You don't worry about what everybody else is doing because there's nothing you can do to change anybody else.
Right.
All you can do is basically find out that you came into this world and you planned to do something, and you're going to leave this world and they're going to ask you, how did it work out? Because you and I planned it. And so what are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And that's, to me, is the bottom line, that people want to blame other people and they want to change other people. So they're always worrying about something that they really can't change instead of trying to figure out, take personal responsibility for the situation they're in.
Absolutely.
And that's where I go to Shasta. And it was almost like, all I wanted to be able to record these incidents. And at the end, they said, they asked Enrique, can you write this stuff up? He said, no, I'm too busy. Who wants to write it up? And I go, I do. And it was like, and they said, okay, everybody has to hand their material to Grant. And it's like the thing that I most wanted, that's what I got. And so I was on these people, and I found this really nebulous thing. It's not a clear alien coming across a veil. It's this almost like it's like a near-death experience or a ghost experience. It's almost that same sort of thing where it's sort of there. And if you're really good at it, and that's the thing, is the experiences weren't happening to everybody. They were happening to the people who were very sensitive, who had worked at it, and they were able to sense it. And they could be in this. You and I could be in their field with them. They can pick it up, and you and I can't. So it's a matter of your personal development as to how close you are.
No question about it. Yeah, no question.
And I think it's all messaging. Definitely, the more I look at it, the more I think everything, whether it's cattle mutilations, whether it's the supposed abduction, and now they're saying there's no abductions. And that, if it comes down to that, Kit Green said that, and that was said in this Wilson document that was leaked, this no abduction, where everybody went, that's crazy, come on, there's abductions. And then you start looking at it, what if it's true that everything is in your mind, that it's in your consciousness, and there really is no out there? Then you start looking at, well, maybe it's not that way. And the example I'm going to do a lecture on, try to take on the fact there are no abductions. The number one is a girl, and this ties across to other stuff. So the girl her name is Akiana Kramark. She is a double prodigy. She is this girl who painted Jesus at the age of 8 years old, this painting that's worth, who knows, priceless painting. And she was abducted at 5 years old. She disappeared in front of the family in her house. They brought in police. They brought in sniffing dogs. They went for hours to try to find her. And she reappeared in front of a window in front of witnesses.
Materialized is what you're saying. Literally.
Materialized
okay.
Again.
What appeared.
In front of witnesses.
Okay. Yeah.
So the way
she became an Apport then.
She says that Jesus or God took her. And she said she was split into 1,000 pieces, and that she could see how many dogs there were, all the people looking for her and stuff like that. And she was able, like 1,000 minds, 1,000 eyes. And God and Jesus took her through the universe and showed her all these faces and all these different things. And now she's painting this stuff. She's about 20 some years old, and she did 2 books of poetry at 7 years old. And so she's this double prodigy, and she said that God took her. So the question is, well, and I had a girl come to me and said, no, she knew the family. She said that was an alien abduction. And so the question is Jesus abducting people? Is God abducting people? Because this is the most documented abduction there was. They had the police, they had police reports, they have all this sort of stuff of her being gone in the house and all these people looking for her. And it comes down to this whole idea that her experience was that she was taken sort of in an etheric state into the universe and shown all this stuff and all these messages, and she's doing all these unbelievable paintings coming back. And that's the whole thing, is this distinguishing between what's physical and what's not physical. It's all the same thing, and it's getting slippery all the time as to what is physical and what's not physical.
There's an argument that there may not be any physical, and as you're telling these stories, and I'm thinking, I just got off of someone else's show. I was guesting on someone else's show. I was thinking of this idea in the context of what you're saying of, are we living in a simulation? Are we living in a holographic universe where these rules can be broken, where you can dematerialize, so-called dematerialize, and then come back again? And again, what role do we play in this? In a virtual reality, in a virtual game, you get to make the rules. You get to make a request and have it manifest for you immediately. So what are we really dealing with in terms of the true nature of reality? And I don't expect you to answer that, but I have a feeling that there's something more to it.
We know from the quantum world that time and space may not exist. And so, but we keep falling back into this physical world thing, is that I'm pretty sure that it's all going to be this, one physicist said it was all ooly stuff. It's all this stuff. And there are no magical things. There's nothing magic. There's just people who understand more of the laws.
Absolutely.
I think so. They can come into the physical world and they can go back, and they can make apports appear and go back into their world. They can do this kind of stuff. We can't. We think that there's just the physical world, so it's magic to us. It's just we don't understand what they understand.
The rules of engagement. Well, I think of someone like Satya Sai Baba, who's been gone quite a few years now, that was able to manifest a number of things in his hands, including some, what was it called? And Michael Talbot actually used this as an example in terms of apports. I can't think of it. Some kind of a rare nut that he was able to manifest that had a layer of gold, this very, very rare quality of gold that he was able to just absolutely manifest. I mean, this is throughout recorded history. And the other thing I want to bring up, we're going to have to wind down shortly, but I wanted to bring up this whole idea of manifestation, that we may be triggering it, or at least playing a role on demand. It makes me think of the CE5 protocols as well as HICE, human initiated contact experiences that are done. They're initiated. They're self-initiated. I want a feather to appear, and it appears. Show me. So there's something that we are triggering in whomever we're messaging to, Grant, that is granting our request. Yeah.
The more, and when you start looking at it and starting to understand that way, then if you come up on an experiencer, and that's what I started to do, is I would say to them, so anything ever appear or anything? And they go, yeah. And it's literally almost every single one of them. It was really weird, and it's never been brought up. And so you get that, and that's when you cross over to whatever their other experiences are. You start wondering, okay, they found a piece of metal. Is that really came across, or is that a physical thing, or is that coming across the veil? If you see an alien and it turns into a ball of light, I mean, that's coming across the veil. It's not really physical. Maybe the crafts aren't physical. And even this alien autopsy, this body that they have, if they can make a lapis stone with gold and silver appear, can they make an alien body appear that was never really alive?
Absolutely.
They can do anything. And so you start looking at the whole thing,
right,
that it may all be this sort of game of show and tell in order to move us to the next step, to make us realize, almost like the idea of LSD, that LSD was one of only 10,000. The guy had done 10,000 different chemicals. It was the only one he went back and did a second time. Mm-hmm. And that's when you discover LSD, and that breaks open the materialistic thing where you go into that world where it all starts to fall apart in 1943. And I think that's what it is. It's this gradual progression where the more we go, the more we realize it is not the physical world we think it is.
That's right. Jesus said, and I think I'm probably paraphrasing, I can do miracles, and so can you. And maybe they are trying to remind us and have us remember that this is what we are made of as well. That I agree with, Grant.
Yeah, that's where I always use that expression. Jesus said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, can say to this mountain, move, and it will move, and nothing shall be impossible. And if either you believe he's making this stuff up, But the more I look at the world, the more that is true. It's just you need an awful lot of faith. You need an awful lot of understanding of how this thing works. And we just are in a world where we still believe the physical world. We don't believe this kind of stuff. And if you don't believe it, you're not going to manifest it.
I love what you're doing so much, man. You carry on, and you are going to witness many more miracles, I know. Grant Cameron, on behalf of so many people who love what you do, I want to just say thank you so much. You and I, remember we were sitting curbside outside of the Awakening conference in the UK, and you were just the enthusiasm. I'm just in awe, just looking at you going, oh my God, this man is just you're so passionate about what you do.
I was thinking about that today. Like, I think I'm one of the luckiest people alive. I mean, if you realize what you're in, I mean, I just like,
it's amazing.
It's amazing when you see that you're eternal, you have all this sort of stuff. And don't get so tied up, enjoy it, and try to play the game to move it along as much as you can. And I appreciate your interest in what I'm doing, and I'm interested you're going down the same road I am. And I think a lot of people 10 years ago, you and I and a bunch of people weren't going down this road. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
I agree. Well, carry on, my friend.
Thanks,
and thank you so much for coming on such short notice. And we're going to have you back real soon. So thanks, Grant. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in, as always, to Higher Journeys. We'll talk to you real soon.